Hello, this is Tony Victor, and you're listening to a brief passage from my book. Well, a couple of pages, anyways, which ends up being usually a chapter in this particular book. The name of the book is called An Arc for a Perilous Time, and it contains a number of interesting charts, diagrams, and lots of good information if you're interested in spiritual development and learning about esoteric symbols and stuff in general. So this is just a brief video, but you can actually buy the book online on Amazon. It's in paperback, hardback, also audiobook too. So check it out if you're interested, if this strikes your curiosity. I feel I should also preface this particular chapter by talking about the fact that it's related to the hieroglyphic monad of John Dee and the examination of how that's kind of put together as I understand it. So it's developed through this narrative, and there's a subsequent diagram which I'll also include in this video. So please enjoy. Chapter 12 of Sphere and Scale. Following Emidoronke's departure, Dionysus and Ulysses examined the materials he left behind. Astrological symbols marked M's notes, and various diagrams displayed the enneagram and what he perceived as musical notes encircling some of them. Ulysses moved to the other side of the table to examine the notes as well. Ulysses, with a confused look, asks, "What is it?" Dionysus, also looking confused, says, "Well, let's look. I spent a great deal of time studying astrology, so I'm familiar with these symbols, but not necessarily how they were placed and the positions they appear. Jupiter is placed at the bottom left with what appears to be hydrogen 768. That would mean that position 0, or 9, would likely be related to Sagittarius. But could it not also perhaps be Pisces, which Jupiter rules?" asked Ulysses. "In other instances, it may be," said Dionysus. "The vital thing to consider is function as they relate to centers. Sagittarius is in position DO 768 because it relates to the physical moving center of mankind's body, namely the hips." And I'm just going to stop here briefly to mention that this is relating to the system of the fourth way of G.I. Gurdjieff. If you're not familiar with P.D.S. Spensky's diagrams about the enneagram and how they relate to the physical body, I made some other videos in some of my other YouTube channels. There may be one on this one as well, depending on what channel you're watching this video on. GTR Slayer is my old account. And then there's this other one which I post mostly on these days, which is also Quicksilver Astrology. So check out both those sites, those YouTube channels. If you're not subscribed, try and subscribe to both of them if you can. There will be some older content on the GTR Slayer one that is not on this account. So you may want to check out that one if you're interested in some more practical developmental stuff from back in the day, about 10 years ago. It's still very good. I think you'll enjoy that as well. With that being said, let me continue reading on. Okay. But could it not also perhaps be Pisces, which Jupiter rules?" asked Ulysses. "In other instances it may be," said Dionysus. "The vital thing to consider is function as they relate to centers. Sagittarius is in position DO 768 because it relates to the physical moving center of mankind's body, namely the hips. But then following Sagittarius must be Capricorn," replies young Ulysses. "Yes and no," answers Dionysus. "It may be both, Capricorn and Aries. In Emidoronke's notes here, he shows hydrogen 384 in the position second from the bottom with the diagram of man number 2. This must imply some sort of restriction. We would suppose that our culture consists of at least men number 4, but he also places Saturn in a corresponding position. Though the position is better, it is still restricted. For a man number 2, he is under restriction because of negative emotion, usually centered around the expression of anger, irritation, or some other form of general negativity. Though Capricorn, depending upon circumstances, may be negative, it may also relate to crystallization. I must imagine they are likely to share the same placement. Position 1 becomes position 10 in the next octave. We may not even reach Sagittarius in the first octave, though it is essential to know that we begin with one body and move to another in the next octave. Capricorn in this case would crystallize something higher if enough substance is accumulated. Say, for example, if the physical body were to accumulate enough refined matter to produce an astral body. Once the matter becomes pure enough, it enters another octave and is crystallized. Capricorn represents something stable, as it is, of course, an earth sign. Really, though, hydrogen 384 is associated with Aries, in this case a fire sign ruled by Mars. which may be either a generative or destructive force. When it is with Scorpio, it would be considered generative if it is an ascending octave, relating to hydrogen 12 or C12 for an ordinary man in the outside world. After hydrogen 768 is brought into the body as physical food, it is broken down or heated and eventually becomes hydrogen 384. Though we assume Virgo may rule the bowels in this instance, it may be different, especially because in this diagram we are looking at 4 different types of beings: a 2, a 4, a 5, and a 6. Why is Mercury placed here? Ulysses points to hydrogen 192. So according to M's other charts, he places Taurus at Me 192, so naturally Venus is its ruler. However, Do 192 is ruled by Gemini, and its master is Mercury, replies Dionysus. Hydrogen 192 is the air we breathe, Gemini representing the twin organs of the lungs. Now notice both Gemini and Sagittarius are mutable astrological signs, and all the Do points are these mutable signs. Then where is Pisces? Asks Ulysses. Dionysus looks at the diagram, then points to Gemini. It must be here, he says. The enneagram is incomplete, but then so is an ordinary man. When we looked at the chart Emma Duranke had shown us, there was an enneagram with 12 points and 12 astrological signs, so that it no longer had 9 points, and instead of 3 intervals of Do, it would instead have 4. So we must use our imagination here to determine what it would look like. Okay, but what about the moon here at hydrogen 96? Dionysus looks at Ulysses and smiles. You know already. It is because most of the outside world is food for the moon. When we look at a 7-fold diagram and remove the intervals, the middle becomes a means to determine the level of being. The center of gravity for man number 2 here is Fa 96, corresponding to 96 laws under the moon. Because he has not crystallized anything permanent in him, this substance will feed other beings, namely planetary bodies or beings on the level of man number 5. If we look at the digestive function of a man number 5, it will break down hydrogen 96. So that must mean that our moon, Diagamo, is also under 24 laws because it feeds on hydrogen 96. Planetary bodies are under 24 laws, but the moon is under 96 compared to other more developed planets. I think I'm beginning to understand, but why is there an upside-down Saturn symbol there? Dionysus examines it and notices it is, indeed, as Ulysses says. Well, that is a symbol for Ceres, perhaps more commonly known to the Greeks as the goddess Demeter. I suppose this must mean that the restriction is removed, and one then becomes initiated. This implies an inner shift away from automatism. The center of gravity marked for man number 5 is hydrogen 24, and has a symbol of Venus. So we must assume there is a change in feeling. Something emotional happens. There is much to unpack in this diagram here. At one point in the history of the Uranikites, there were 3 halls for the wisdom keepers. A hall for knowledge, where students learned a common language, and one of being where they developed an astral coding through various means. The third and central hall was for those with enough understanding to develop individual reasoning, and the collaborative development of objective knowledge. The aims of each part of the school organically created a natural order of initiation. Those entering the third hall must speak the common language and engage in their own work. However, this meaning became quite diluted over time until the Uranikites became prideful, lazy, and lacking in leadership. Dionysus and Ulysses began to draw different diagrams of their own to see if they could determine the correct movement of the planets, signs, and hydrogens. One thing they noticed is that the charts must be thought of in a living, moving way. What is a symbol with a cross through it for man number 4, asked Ulysses. That is a symbol for the earth itself, says Dionysus. It's goddess Demeter's realm. In the ancient mystery teachings, Persephone descends under the earth, kidnapped by the god of the underworld himself, Hades. She is in a manner of speaking initiated and subsequently transfigured. Hydrogen 48 in the Do position is associated with Virgo and mutable Mercury. Understanding the legomenisms of the Greeks here will help us better comprehend these diagrams. Virgo, of course, may refer to Persephone as a virgin before descending to meet with Hades. Or we may take this as a symbolic being duty of all Uranikites under 48 laws and the reciprocal feeding within the ray of creation. We may also examine the cross of the earth as a mesoteric expression of the symbolism of Christ. It is the beginning of conscious labor and intentional suffering. Though this idea was never meant for a single man, it is the being duty of all men and women. What about the outer planets and their positions in the diagrams? Asked Ulysses. Well, they do not seem to line up with the rest of the astrology, but perhaps they are related to functions of the higher emotional or higher intellectual center. Though I would encourage you to study the material and know enough to have a conversation with M, and then perhaps it will be you giving lectures in the Great Hall. Dionysus chuckles and drinks some more Posca. If you all enjoyed that, please like and subscribe and check out my book, An Arc for a Perilous Time. It's available on Amazon. And again, I am Tony Victor. You're listening to Quicksilver Astrology channel, as well as also probably even the GTR Slayer channel from back in the day. So please subscribe to the new recent channel, Quicksilver Astrology, and you can check out the website by the same name if you're interested in finding more of my material, or if you'd like to get a chart, or even just a tarot reading. QuicksilverAstrology.com.
ज्योतिष का ज्ञान यह रहस्य Astrology's knowledge deep as sea नक्षत्र कहानियाँ कहता यहाँ Constellations tell their stories to thee कुंडलिनी जगाओ आत्मा जागृत करो Awaken Kundalini, let your spirit rise ऊर्जा भीतर से बहती है Energy flows from deep inside